Hi again. This is Patricia Valdovinos, also known as Patty, with the second interview for the RUSA podcast series. Joining us today is Kirk McLeod, an open data coordinator for the Government of Alberta in Canada. He's actually the only open data coordinator. Am I right, Kirk?
Absolutely, Patty.
Okay, so hi, Kirk. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. School's almost ending, so that's good.
Oh, very nice.
All right. So I wanted to begin by asking you to tell us a little bit about yourself, aside from what I just shared with everyone. You can share with us your interest, a little bit of your background, and your position, and things such as that.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, I've actually been in the library field since 2000, and I come by it honestly. My mother is a library assistant at my local university and has been since I was quite young. So I'm sort of second generation. Um, I originally got a diploma as a library technician, which it's just a library technician diploma in Canada. I think in the States you call them paraprofessionals. And that was back in 2000. And I finished my 2 year college diploma and immediately went to work for a pair of nonprofit organizations for First Nation um, communities in my city. The first was called Native Counseling Services of Alberta, and the second was called the Nietzsche Training, Research, and Health Promotions Institute. One was a legal counsel organization, and the other was an addictions counseling organization. And I basically ran the special library for the two of them. While I was there, I started taking a bachelor's degree through Athabasca University, which is a distance university here in Alberta. And although it took me a long time, I took it for 7 years. In 2011 got my bachelor's degree in communication studies, and then from 2011 to 2014, I attended the School of Library and Information Studies at the University of Alberta in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. Originally, it was going to take me a lot longer than 2 years. I was doing it part-time. But in my second year, I became a Spectrum Scholar through the ALA. And one of the neat things about being a Spectrum Scholar is there's a requirement for scholars that you need to take at least 2 classes a term. So my time at the university was accelerated, which was great because, of course, there were now resources for me to move at a quicker pace. While I was a student at the University of Alberta, I started working for my provincial library system. It's a special library just for the government, so like a state library. The Alberta Government Library. I was a serials technician, and as soon as I graduated, I moved from my technician role into my current position as the open data coordinator for the province. So it's not in the traditional library field, but I get to use pretty much all of my skills, which is very exciting for me. And even more exciting for me right now is my oldest daughter actually is going to be attending the same library school I graduated from starting in September. So she'll be third generation, so almost like a mini library dynasty, I guess.
It's true. You can all make your own library, have it endowed and everything. I can see it. I can see it in the future.
Absolutely.
I've never heard 3 generations. I've heard of 2, but this is my first time hearing of 3. So
Excellent.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. I've heard like moms who raise their child in libraries and end up in libraries, but like it's cool to see that a grandchild is in this. I'm a big generation fan, right? Because I believe that there's a beautiful thing to see how everyone ends up, and so just seeing how you all have similar backgrounds within a career is pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you.
Yeah, and also congrats on you and your daughter, right? I think it's important to congratulate parents for what they've done to allow us to be where we are. As a child myself, I always congratulate my mom.
Well, thank you very much. I do the same thing with my mom. Once this podcast comes out, that'll be one of the first people I send the link to will be my mother's.
Yay! Actually, I haven't shared my first one with my mom. She's always asking me. I'd probably share it with her. Thanks for for telling me that. She's gonna be like, "I, Patty, you're always doing something new." All right. Thank you for sharing that. And sharing your interests, and congratulations again. So my second question is, to describe your experiences with RUSA. So, for those of you who don't know, Kirk was actually the past RUSA intern before me, and so I just wanted him to share a little bit about that and also his experiences being a member now. So, if you can just elaborate and share.
Sure, absolutely. So, as a Spectrum Scholar, you are invited into to join any of the divisions or sections um, when you first become a Spectrum Scholar. And for me, reference has always been an incredibly important uh, both part of library services, and it's actually honestly my favorite part of library services. So, no questions asked. As soon as I had the opportunity, I joined RUSA, and then during my year as Spectrum Scholar, the opportunity to be or to apply for the internship came up. So I applied for it and was incredibly happy and honored to get it. Uh, for each internship, there's sort of a different project that comes up. So for yours is this podcast series. For mine was an online interview series called the IAMRUSA project. So over the course of my year and a half, I performed online interviews with about 60 reference staff from North America, and we did pretty well. We ended up with about 100,000 page views. We had interviewers, or sorry, I was the interviewer. We had interviewees from academic, public, special, and school libraries, as well as both consultants and vendors. So I think we got a really good sampling of RUSA members from all parts of the profession.
Yeah, no, I was looking at them and they're very diverse, and I love that about it because it just shows how reference can be used within multiple outlets, and you don't have to be the stereotypical reference librarian, right? In an academic setting, right? And so I think your interviews really showed that, and I hope to share that as well within my podcast series. So,
absolutely.
Yeah. And so, do you want to share a little bit of how your experiences are now as a member? And I'm really interested in hearing that, right? Because was it a different transition? Was it an interesting one?
Well, being a member of both the ALA and RUSA is great. Now, for me, of course, I'm coming in from Canada, so we have our own associations at the municipal and provincial and federal level. But a big part of what I like about membership in ALA and membership with RUSA is because librarianship as a profession is one of the professions covered under the North American Free Trade Agreement. So there's an awful lot of librarians moving kind of back and forth between all the countries here in North America. So it's nice to keep myself in the know. And totally selfishly for myself, I love the conferences. So it's always a highlight for me every year I can make it out to either the midwinter meeting or the annual meeting. As far as RUSA itself goes, I'm a huge fan of going through the website, looking over things, trying to find ways I can find resources that are available that are of use to me in my position. And one of my favorites is, and it's actually one of the guidelines that's on the RUSA homepage, is one from the it used to be called MARS, which was the Machine Assisted Reference section, but now I think it's ETS. I think it's the Emerging Technology section.
Okay, yes.
Anyway, they have a guideline that's called the Guideline for the Introduction of Electronic Information Resources to Users. And as the Open Data Coordinator in my current job, basically we have this online portal that shares all sorts of government information. So it's basically this big fancy product that the whole goal is to allow government workers to find this and be able to share what they're doing and statistics they're keeping and all sorts of data with the public. So I get to basically, using the public as an end user and the other coworkers in the government of Alberta as clients, I get to sort of introduce this new technology and this new platform. And so I actually use this guideline, and I use it on a fairly regular basis because it sort of walks through, here's how to get staff on board with a new technology, and here's how to make sure your users are getting the best use out of it. So it's old. I think it's 2007 was when the guideline was created, but for my job, it's actually really useful, and it's a resource that if I were not a member of RUSA, I probably would not have come across. So
Mm.
it's actually professionally a great help for me. And then uh, being a member is nice for when I'm at those conferences because they have social events and they have their own sessions. So I get to go to places where I'm gonna both it'll be content that is interesting to me,
Mm-hmm.
but also I'll get to meet a lot of people and catch up with a lot of people who are also in RUSA who I've gotten to know over the years as during my time as an intern and then afterwards as well.
Oh, okay. No, yeah, it sounds that's one thing I love about Rusa is that you find things you never expected to be on there. um,
Mm-hmm.
and so I guess that's my follow up question is what is something that you have found on Rusa or on the Rusa website or within these social meetings or these networking events that has surprised you in the sense that you didn't think was part of reference services?
Well, in the last ALA meeting I went to was the one in Boston,
Mm-hmm.
and they actually had a speed mentoring meeting, which
Mm-hmm.
I never actually tried one of these before. Just basically a way that people who had been in the profession for a while could meet with students and kind of newcomers to the profession. And it was great because it was speed mentoring, sort of like using the same um, format as a dating thing. You got to meet all sorts of different people that you would never normally have 2 or 3 minutes with people like director level people and very very high up and respected in their careers. And it was excellent. Actually, that was a kind of both an eye opening experience, and I got to connect with a number of people that I still follow up with now. So that was um, an unexpected and very pleasant surprise.
No, yeah, I was unfortunately I didn't make it to this. I was gonna call it speed dating. Speed. I didn't make it to one of those either. Um, the speed mentoring, but I heard it was a really great turnout, and I think anytime that a person in a position in a career position that's been in their job for a really long time, anytime they have a chance to mentor someone, I think it's a great thing to see. I've been mentored, and I've mentored um, myself, and I think it's a really cool lineage thing to pass on, right? Because it's beautiful to see how those who've mentored you impacted you enough to therefore allow you to mentor others. And so it was really cool to see that happening. So yeah, it surprised me too. So thank you for bringing that up.
Absolutely.
And so I wanted to go back a little bit to your career paths and all these different journeys. I think, as I mentioned in the last podcast, I'm always really interested to hear what led people to be at the position they are at now, right? Or within the positions that led them to be where they are now, right? So, you mentioned a bit about that in the beginning, and I was just interested in what led you to those choices, right? I want to get a little bit personal here because as a person going into the workforce now, today's my last day of class actually, and I graduate on next week.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. It's a bit scary, and I think now is the time, if you don't mind, for me to ask these personal these personal questions in the sense for someone to share their personal narratives on what made them decide to leave a job or to move on to another job or things like that. So if you
Oh,
wanted to
sure.
refer back to the question in the beginning and then share a little bit more about your personal narrative and choices. I guess that's my theme. Like my real question is, how did you feel about making these different choices? Because you've done a lot from.
I have,
Yeah, and
absolutely.
it's amazing because I'm always like, and then you said yourself you didn't end up in a. I always want to say stereotypical, but I say that in question. I mean, in quotation marks, where it's like, because I think librarians can be anything at this point, right? We don't have to have the title, and we can be anything as seen by your position. So I'm just interested to see that, to see what led you choose a position that isn't, doesn't call you a librarian, but you are still a librarian.
Absolutely. So there were actually sort of 2 points in my career where I sort of had to make this decision. The first was running that one person library, and that was actually in my province we have a thing called step grants, and it's basically summer work for ongoing student. So I had done my first year of my technician diploma
Mm-hmm.
back in 1998, 99, and was just doing a summer job for these two organizations. It was cataloging mostly, but 2 weeks into uh, my 4-month contract,
Mm-hmm.
my supervisor, the one librarian for this one person library, actually got offered a job in her own hometown and left. And so I um, actually took a really big sort of risk, and I went and because it was a smaller nonprofit organization, I went and found in our archives proposals that the CEO at the time had written for various projects he was working on, and I'll admit I entirely stole the format he used to say, here's why, although I'm only a first year student, you should give me that person's job and let me work evening hours and weekend hours while I'm at school. And they actually did it. So as a second year student, I was also working full time and basically fell right into a, um, a full time permanent position that I kept for 10 years. And it was great. And after 10 years, I actually sort of got it. When you're working in a one person library, is you get to do everything, which is the benefit. I did cataloging and acquisitions and reference and programming development and like everything you can do. But the problem is you do it by yourself. And for me, in the last 5 years I was there, I was working in a basement with no windows, and it was very isolating. And then my local university actually created a project where they were taking First Nations tribal college libraries, and the Nietzsche Institute is considered a tribal college library because it specifically trains addictions counselors, and put all of their collections together in a thing called the First Nations Information Collection, which was basically a library consortium. So these 5 smaller libraries, some of them, like at my level, we had an online catalog, but it wasn't great. It was like a school library catalog level, and some of the libraries had like nothing, like card catalogs, and that was about it. And so this consortium took the 5 of them together, gave us a shared catalog, and basically showed me at the time the really fun things you can do sort of at the higher level of library work when you're working in the community. And when I saw that, that's what had me decide, well, now I've got to go to library school because that's the stuff I'm really interested in. And then with my current job, actually, I ended up leaving that job. Loved it very much, but school, even distance learning school, takes a lot of time, and I needed time to focus on school. So I moved to first a records management job, and then to the government of Alberta as a serials technician. But once I graduated from library school, for graduate school, Alberta Government Library had 4 sites, and we were going through a consolidation where our 4 physical sites were being moved down to 1 site. And so suddenly there were a number of librarians who would be kind of vying for these positions, that's great. But for me, as somebody who at the time was pretty much exactly where you were when the consolidation hit, where I had just a couple days of school left, and I didn't have my degree yet. So I sort of rolled the dice with the government and said, here's my skill set, and here's what I can do, and maybe we can figure out a good place for me. And they found a great place for me. I'm currently in the department I'm in is called Open Government and Transparency. It's part of the kind of worldwide open government movement where governments are trying to be as transparent as they can with publications and data, and basically all of this information that governments gather, they're doing with taxpayer dollars. So unless there's a security reason or a privacy reason why you can't share certain data, like health data maybe, all of it should be accessible and available to the public. And so I moved. It's funny because I started in a very, and you're right, stereotypical is not quite the word, but it's sort of traditional. I started in a very traditional library setting, and I've now ended up in a position where I'm still heavily involved with the community. I presented at a conference about a month ago on the program I'm currently working on, and I've given lectures at my library school in in a policy class, again on sort of how my job works and how you can sort of take your MLIS degree and move it into non-traditional roles, and that's been great. Actually, I was really nervous about going into the position at first because I sort of originally went into library school thinking I want to get into like academic libraries or public libraries, and I'm not in either of those now. But it's really rewarding where I'm at now. So I would say part of it's been choice. Why I chose to do the original nonprofit library stuff was I just took a really big gamble, and then part of it is luck. I mean, yes, I have the experience, I have the background, and I'm very qualified to do my work, but it was sort of just the right timing, I guess is a better way to say that, to get into the position I'm in now. And right now it's great. I'm kind of in that position where I'm 2 years in, and I can't believe that I found such a good position to be working in.
That's good. I'm really excited to be where you are in the in the near future. I think because that's one of the things that I love hearing about from people in the same profession as me is that they're like, you just take risks and you just never know where you're gonna end up, but you have to have the faith to just know that you're gonna end up where you're meant to end up in the long run, right? So I think that's where I'm at right now is that I'm just, I'm going to roll with the waves and, see where. So I appreciate you sharing that, and I'm very thankful for that. And so my next question is, do you think that reference services have been a part of all these different career paths and journeys?
Oh, sure. Well, reference has been a thing I've been doing since I was a technician, like running that first one-person library in that I did orientations, and I did research questions, and I did readers advisory. We had a book club, which is fun because for special libraries that's not often the case.
Yeah.
For me, I think it comes down to some of those core organizational values that RUSA has, like building relationships among members from all types of libraries, this sort of relationship building with your patrons or clients or users. I know depending on the library school you're in, there's different terms for them, but building those relationships with people and just having people ask you these reference questions that are so fun and so interesting to get into. And I mean, I've had reference questions that are bizarre and strange, and I've had reference questions that ended up in some kind of a little bit more frightening spaces. So it's actually a lot of fun. My very first reference question as a student doing work experience was I was working with a geological survey, so maps, and I actually had somebody call and ask me where they would look in our area for like burials, like grave sites.
Oh, okay.
And when I asked, sure, we can find that out. Can I ask why? This person was saying because their spouse had just had a heart attack,
Oh my gosh.
and was on the couch next to them. And so I actually had to go to another phone and call 911 because
oh my god, because you were like,
I guess just in their own head they thought, well, this is clearly the place you need to go to, or this is the next step, and didn't realize obviously you should call 911 right away. But obviously, in that sort of circumstance, you just sometimes you make strange leaps. So and that was actually my very first reference question in any library setting. After that one, they're all, although interesting, they're not nearly as scary as they were at first.
Yeah, that's a good one to start off with. I thankfully did not have them. But no, reference services I feel like are adventurous. for for a lack of a better word, because you never know where you're gonna get or from who. You could get such a random question from an adult, and I think that's where we have to be aware of our own biases, right? Of how age works is like, just because you're above 50 doesn't mean that I should expect that you have this knowledge, right? And so it's also being aware of that as a reference librarian. So I think you touch upon a really good point about how, we just never know, and we have to be so open and be aware about how we can't expect everyone to know things.
Absolutely.
I took an ILI class this quarter, and so one of the things we covered was how to teach computer literacy to people who might not know even use a computer, right, or even turn on a computer, but how to do all this, right, and so how to be patient and how not to assume or not get frustrated, and so I think in that sense, I would like to hear your perspective on that.
Absolutely. Um, so yeah, basically, I think when you're working with people, and it is sort of you have to kind of start um, losing any sort of preconceived notions of what you think this person wants to ask. It is sort of this weird tightrope walk you do where it's in your own head. You're thinking, oh, I clearly, based on your body language or maybe a book you're holding or something, can tell probably what you're going to ask, but I could be wrong, and I should wait.
Yes.
And in the past, I've gotten in, like, not in, like, job trouble, but in, you make an assumption,
yes.
and you go, oh, clearly you want this, and then the person says, well, no, what I would like is that, and you're like, oh, sorry, my bad.
Yes.
But yeah, no, I think basically just making sure, I think a big part of reference is making sure that the person you're interacting with, or people, if it's a group of people, is that they feel heard. I'm very big on the whole take what they say when they're asking a question and paraphrase it, and then bring it back just to say, just so I understand, here's what you're asking for. For me, part of this comes from working with people in addictions counseling or legal counseling, or even way back in geological surveys. I think with any sort of subject, there are special terms or specialized terms and jargon that you, as the staff member, don't necessarily know, and so you have to sort of make sure that you're giving them the best information you can, and realize that if they're asking about it, often they do have a pretty good idea of what they're looking for. So yeah, no, for me, I think a lot of it comes down to quickly building that sort of trust relationship with the person that you're there to help, and even if in the end, if they're asking for research on some topic that you actually in the end can't find, that they know you tried, and they know all the places that you went to look. Because I think I've read in papers on reference services that patrons who, if they can see that the library staff member has attempted and weren't able to help them, they still actually feel that that was a really good reference interaction. Even if they sort of stumped the librarian, it's like, well, I saw that person try, we worked together, I would go back and ask again. So yeah.
Those are really great tips. Thank you for that. It's making sure that people feel heard, and that can sound very simple, but it's actually quite difficult.
Yes, absolutely.
Especially like doing it real quick, right? Like you have this question and you have to develop it with patrons on an everyday basis, and within minutes. It could happen within minutes. So it's I think you provided really great advice on that sense.
Oh, well, thank you.
My next question, what does reference services mean to you?
Its most simple level, to me, it is connecting people with the information that they're looking for. Whether that information is a good book, whether that information is the answer to a statistical question, or whether, in my case, with my own job, it is getting them to the information, the government information that they're looking for. References helping the person find what it is they're looking for, and basically leaving them with a very good experience of, this person is here to help me, and it's a good service to use. Like, I find that a lot of people coming into libraries, and personally, my background is I'm a member of the Cree Indian tribe
Mm-hmm.
in Canada, and basically there's sort of this feeling um, where among a lot of First Nations people, where when you're going into a library, you can sort of be um, a little hesitant to ask staff for help.
Mm-hmm.
So, as a staff member, it's good to be able to sort of find a way to be helpful, to say, no, it's my job. I'm not too busy. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not doing something more important. Actually, helping you is my my job. It's what I'm getting paid for.
Yeah.
So, for me, reference is very much a matter of just getting whoever it is in front of you to the information they need, or to the information resource they need, and for them to have a really good experience with that.
Thank you. And that I guess this is another question that connects to that, because reference is very important, and we see it all the time. But I know we sometimes have individuals now that say that they don't believe in reference services anymore. What do you think about that? And how do you explain? Because I think reference services are important, and they're definitely needed, right? In whatever context you put them in, right? Because I feel like people are very creative in how they deliver reference services. But some people argue that we don't need them anymore. And so, how can you explain to them, if you do believe that they are still very much used? How do you believe that we can tell them that they need to be appreciated a bit more?
Absolutely. Well, I think in a lot of ways that comes down to people saying, well, we have Google now,
Yeah.
so why with Google, why do we need reference at all? And I read in a book called The Portable MLIS. There was actually an article that was specifically called "Librarians, the Best Googlers in the Room." And basically, it does come down to our background and our education allows us to find great ways to help you find connections to whatever the service you're looking for, whatever the information resource you're looking for, that you as a user or a patron may not necessarily know existed.
Mm-hmm.
I think when it comes to something like Google, which is excellent, most people when they're doing searches tend to just stick to that first page. So they'll sort of type in whatever it is they're looking for, skim through the first whatever sort of apparent on the screen, and assume that's the best information. Which sometimes it is, but not always, and it's not always the most complete information, or in their case, the most helpful information. And I think with reference, it's showing people here are excellent ways where you can be more effective at finding your information. One of the things I really liked about working with librarians in academic library settings when I was a student was because it's a learning environment. That's actually a much larger part of the reference interaction is we'll show you how to use this database, or we'll show you how to better access these services. Mm-hmm. And for me, that's the real strength in reference is sort of this: we can all help each other out to be much more effective at our jobs. Mm-hmm. When I was in my non-profit library, I guess most libraries are non-profit as far as fiscal goes, but my sort of tagline that I always said to people was, my job is to help you do your job better. Mm. And that's really what it is, whether your job is an actual paying job, or whether it is you're looking for something good to read or something good to watch, and we all only have a limited amount of time to read and watch and do whatever it is we're doing. So to have somebody say, oh, here's a really good example of something you might like, connects people to those information resources, so those great reads. On my off time, I run or I moderate 2 book clubs, so I'm very, very big on. Although Reader's Advisory has very little to do with my day job, it is what I do in my off hours, and I think getting people connected with kind of the stuff and want and showing them here are more effective ways to do that, and maybe here's some things you haven't taken into consideration that can be helpful in future, is really what reference is all about to me.
No, yeah, it's true. I think you bring up a good point where it's like we tend to do a little bit more than Google by helping you navigate through these systems, right? And I think that's what I say is that our jobs are important and that reference services are needed. And
Yes.
I'm like, don't say that anymore. No, but no, thank you for sharing that. So my last question is, do you have any advice for those contemplating joining RUSA?
Oh, do it. Definitely. Sorry. My advice is absolutely join RUSA. For ALA has, I think, six divisions. And for me, a lot of what I do is technology based, and there are the technology divisions, but even though my job, which is basically getting government data in a easy to find and readable location for the public, so it's a lot of online stuff. It is a lot of computer work, but at its most basic level, I'm helping users access information, which is reference. It is 100% reference, and the webinars RUSA has, the programming it has at conferences, the online resources, even like the guidelines, which again I find they're fascinating reads on the website, and things like the interviews I did last year or your podcast. Like I really enjoyed the first one you did with Anne, because it's interesting to see what other people are saying about the profession, and these are, although anybody can listen to the podcast, these are things that if you're a member of RUSA, you're more likely to hear about and then be able to access. And I've just had so many opportunities and connections with people that come from membership that I can't imagine not being a member. And the benefits of being a member aren't just here's a fun session to go to at a conference. There's all sorts of things you can do. So I think regardless of what kind of work people end up in, there is a way to tie in the resources RUSA has to what you're doing. So my advice is yes. Anybody who is considering whether or not they should join, yes, absolutely, you should join.
Yeah, I say the same thing. I'm like, no, do it. We all somehow use reference, and I think RUSA is amazing in providing us with more advice on how to better be reference librarians in their profession. So I agree. Thank you, Kirk. And so that leads us to the end of our podcast interview. Thank you so much for agreeing to be a part of it. Did you have any questions for me?
I actually just had one, and it's basically the same question you just asked me. How, as a student, have you found being a member of RUSA? Has that been, and I mean, for you, of course, you're in the States, so it's actually your National Library Association. Have you found that's helped you as a student?
It has. I think right now, I do use reference services within my internships and past work experience that I've had. And so in that sense, it's provided me with more tools on how to be a better reference librarian in that sense. And so I appreciate that greatly. But right now, since I'm joining the workforce, I think hearing the different narratives and personal stories behind those who are RUSA members is really helping me ease my anxiety into going into this workforce as a librarian. Or I might not even be, quote unquote, a librarian in the sense that that's going to be my title. But I think in that sense, it's really cool to find mentorship in that without people always knowing that they're a mentor, but participating in like your interviews or in my podcast really help ease us students who are still trying to figure out what to do next. So I think in that sense, in the more student perspective, it's helpful to see where people end up or like the different professions they have, or just hear their uses of reference services and how important it is for their jobs. That's how it's helped me is really helped me understand how I don't have to be a traditional librarian to use these services, or I don't have to be one to be considered a librarian, right? So yeah.
Absolutely.
Um,
Well, that's excellent.
Thank you.
And that was my question for you. Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much again for everything. I hope you enjoyed the interview podcast, and I look forward to hearing what's next for you and what happens in the future. Um, so yeah.
Absolutely. And you as well.
Okay, so thank you so much.